Hey scientists, it's Jessica Power, one of the science curriculum coordinators at Kansas City Public Schools. Scientists, the weather's changing outside. You might notice that on some days it's really cold when we wake up, and some days it's not too bad. Well, scientists, every day the weather changes. In fact, not even just every day does the weather change. The weather can change minute by minute. So let's talk about weather. Today we're going to learn about what weather is. We're going to learn about different kinds of weather, different types. And we're also going to create a weather log that you can fill in every day for the next week or so. And then next week we'll talk about the data. And we'll also look next week at how meteorologists use data to make forecasts or predictions about what the weather is going to be like in the next few days. So let's get started. Scientists, I have a definition back here. Our definition of weather is what the atmosphere or the air around us is on a day and place or a location. So that means that right here in Kansas City at 8:10 in the morning, the weather is going to be different than if we were in California at 8:10 in the morning. And that's because the weather changes based on location and time. So scientists, that also means that at 8:10 right now, the sun might be out. But this also means that in 2 hours, it could be cloudy, or it could be colder, or it could be warmer. So the weather is constantly changing. Now, during different times of the year, we see similar types of weather. But as a whole, the weather is always changing. So scientists, with our definition of weather, let's talk about some types of weather. There are lots of different types of weather. There's lots of different types of precipitation or water coming down from the sky. There's different wind speeds that happen on a daily basis. And all of these different things impact our weather. So let's talk about these types of precipitations. Let's talk about wind. Wind can make a huge difference in how warm or cold it feels to us. Have you ever gone outside on a really cold winter day and it's really calm, there's not a lot of wind, maybe the sun is out, and while it's cold, it's not too bad. But let's think about a winter day when the sun is out and it's really, really windy. That wind makes it feel colder for us. Now, sometimes in the summer, the wind makes it feel hotter. So depending on how hard the wind is blowing or what mile per hour the air is traveling, that can impact what the weather is like. Some days we don't get a lot of wind, and some days we get lots and lots of wind. Sometimes we know a storm is coming when the wind starts to pick up or it starts to die down. So the wind can be a factor or a part of weather. Now let's talk about precipitation. Precipitation deals with water. Now, scientists, in the air or in our atmosphere, there's teeny tiny little droplets of water. And as those water droplets get high enough in the sky, they form clouds. So think about lots of teeny tiny little water droplets that come together when they get cold, and that's what creates the clouds in the sky. Now, scientists, at a certain point, those clouds get too many water droplets in them. Just like if you have a sponge and you put it under water, eventually that sponge is going to get too much water in it and the water starts coming out. Well, scientists, we get precipitation or water coming from the sky when there are too many water droplets in the clouds. Now, depending on the temperature of the air, depends on what type of precipitation or rain or snow or sleet or hail we get. So the colder the air temperature is, then we typically see snow. So in the winter time, when it's below freezing or 32 degrees Fahrenheit, we typically experience snow. Now in the spring or the summertime, when it's above 32 degrees Fahrenheit for the temperature, we typically see rain. And then there's some times of the year where it's right at the freezing point, or it's raining and then the temperature starts to drop and it turns into what's called sleet. And sleet is just that cross between rain and snow. It's not quite a liquid, it's not quite solid, it's a little bit of mixture of both. Now scientists, sometimes we do get ice here in Kansas City. And so what happens when we get ice is that the air temperature actually is warm and it's raining. But then the second it hits the ground or a car or any kind of surface, and that surface is below the freezing point, that rain freezes and that causes layers of ice. Now we get snow and we get ice and we get rain, but another kind of precipitation that we can get is hail. And you typically only see hail during thunderstorms. And thunderstorms are really, really cool because there's different temperatures in air. So those temperatures typically layer, or like warmer temperatures typically sit on top and colder temperatures sit on the bottom, and then we have the ground. Now hail forms when it's raining, but the atmosphere is cold and water droplets stick together as the rain is falling to the ground. And that creates layers and creates little balls of hail. So just to recap so far, we have wind that impacts temperature, or impacts our weather. We have different types of precipitation in the form of snow, sleet, rain, hail. And now scientists, we also have temperature. Temperature is how hot or how cold it is outside in the air. Now I want to make sure that we understand that's the air temperature, so the air around us. In your house, if you have a thermostat and it says that it's 72 degrees in your house, that thermostat is measuring the temperature of the air in your house. And you can feel the air. If you wave your hands in front of your face, you can feel the air movement. Now, the thermostat in your house is not reading the temperature of a TV or the refrigerator or a shoe laying on the ground. It's reading the temperature of the air. Same thing when we go to check the temperature outside. We are determining the air temperature. So what the air feels like all around us, how hot or how cold it is. Now in the summertime, it typically is a lot hotter. And then in the spring in the fall, it starts to get a little bit colder. In the winter, the air temperature is usually pretty cold. And then in the spring, we start to see things warm up. So there are patterns in the weather that we see every year. Right now we're in fall, and so that means that anything could happen. We've seen snow already this fall. We've seen beautiful 80-degree days this fall. It's just a matter of what's happening in the atmosphere or the air around us. So scientists, a way that you can kind of look at the weather and analyze the weather is by making a weather log. Now, a weather log is just a daily, you can do it in a notebook or a piece of paper or a whiteboard if you have it at home. And what you do is you just record or collect the weather data for the day. So scientists, on our poster back here, I'm going to show you how you can set up a weather log. And then you and I can track the next few days and see what the weather is like next week, and where we talk about meteorologists and how weather patterns occur, things like that. So here's how you can make a weather log. The first thing about weather is that it's a daily or an hourly thing. So I'm going to write the date. So we're going to have date. Then the next thing I'm going to write is the time, because we know that even though it might be 8:15 right now and it may be 42 degrees outside, in an hour at 9:15 it may be 47 degrees. So I'm going to write time. Scientists, the next piece of weather data that I want to collect is the temperature. Now I'm going to shorten the word temperature because temperature is a really long word. So I'm going to write T-E-M-P with a period, and that stands for temperature. Scientists, the next thing I'm going to look for is the wind speed. So how fast is the air moving? And scientists, the last thing I'm going to write is precipitation. We want to know, is it precipitating? And if it is, what kind? Snow, rain, sleet, hail. So what's happening in the atmosphere? And scientists, I'm going to shorten precipitation because it's a really long word. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make this into a data table. So a data table means that it has a bunch of columns and it has a bunch of rows. So I'm going to start with my rows. So these are my title rows. Now I'm going to make another row. I'm going to keep making rows. So that this way I can record data each day. We'll do the last one. Now the last thing I need to do is create my columns. So a column goes up and down. And here's my data table. Well, to fill in this data table, scientists, how we're going to do that is each day gets a row. So when I start filling in my data table, I'm going to write the date, then I'm going to write the time, then I'm going to write the temperature, then I'm going to write the wind speed, and then I'm going to write if it's precipitating, yes or no. And if it's precipitating, I'm going to write what kind. So scientists, this week we've talked about what is weather. We've talked about the types of weather. And we also have created a data table. Now scientists, next week I'll see you right back here. We're going to take a look at our data and we're going to talk about meteorologists. So people who are on the news, people that study weather to predict what our weather is going to be like the next 7 to 10 days. Scientists, I'll see you right back here next week. Have a great day.
Kindergarten is great at Kansas City Public Schools.
I know they have really good teachers. I know this is a great school.
They teach them stuff that I thought my kids would never be able to know at the age of 5.
Since deciding to send our kiddos to a neighborhood school, we've become even more of a part of our community.
Now is the time to enroll your future kindergartner for the new school year. Visit enrollkc.org today.
The desire to create lives within each of us. From Grammy-winning producers and musicians, to NBA stars, to Navy admirals and Medal of Honor recipients, to internationally renowned artists and beloved local muralists, Paseo graduates have been creating their own success, their own history, their own legacy since 1926. Now it's your time. Create your future at Paseo Academy of Fine and Performing Arts. Learn more at enrollkc.org/Paseo.
Hey scientists, it's Jessica Power, one of the science curriculum coordinators at Kansas City Public Schools. Scientists, I have an interesting topic for you today. The topic is adaptations. Adaptations. Adaptations are different either structures or behaviors that plants and animals have that allow them to survive within their environment. Now that seems kind of simple, right? Like, okay, an animal has really long claws, and those claws allow them to dig in the dirt and allow them to have defensive mechanisms to protect themselves from other animals. But scientists, adaptations are way more interesting than that. So I'm going to tell you a story, and I'm going to go way back in time. I'm going to go back to 1836. That's right. It's currently 2020, and I want to take us all the way back to 1836. So bear with me. Here we go. In 1836, there was a scientist by the name of Charles Darwin. And Charles Darwin set off on a voyage for 5 years. Scientist, he was on a boat traveling the world for 5 years. Now, during his 5 years of travel, he went from island to island, country to country, and made observations about the different types of animals that lived in those environments. So he explored animals in tropical climates, he explored animals in temperate climates, and he became very interested in birds. Now, not like the idea that birds fly or the colors of birds. He specifically was really interested in bird beaks. As he stopped in the Caribbean in an area near the Galapagos Islands, he started to notice that there's all different kinds of birds, and all those different birds have different sizes, lengths, and types of beaks. And he began to ask himself, like all good scientists do, why are their beaks all different? And how does the difference in their beaks allow them to survive? Well, scientists, that is what we're focused on. The idea that different birds have different beaks is adaptations. Now, if you've seen a hummingbird has a really, really long nose or beak. And what happens is that hummingbird sticks that beak into a flower or into a hummingbird feeder to get nectar. And so it uses its beak as more of a straw. Whereas some birds, like a big pelican, or a bird that typically has to dive into the water to get food, they typically have really large beaks. So scientists, I have a little activity for us today, and that activity is going to represent or show us how different kinds of beaks allow birds to eat different foods. Now, as we know, living organisms need food to survive. And we know that plants, they get their energy from the sun, and that allows them to make their own food, right? They're producers. We talked about that a while ago. But scientists, part of being able to survive in the wild as an animal is being able to locate, find, and eat food. Now, a really long time ago, one of our very first meetings together, I talked about penguins. And I talked to you about how penguins have these spiky structures on their tongue that allow them to be able to hold on to prey or shrimp or krill that they're eating. Because the penguins are getting their food out of the ocean, which has lots of water. And so sometimes those shrimp and krill are really slippery. So those little spikes that penguins have on their tongues, those are adaptations. Those are structures the penguin has that allow it to be able to get food and be able to eat that food so it can survive in its environment. Now, unfortunately, penguins aren't the top of the food chain, so not all the penguins survive. But here we go. Let's talk about the tools that I have today. The tools that I have are just simple household things. So you could do this type of activity or experiment at home on your own and redo it. First things first, I have some tongs. And these tongs, they're just kitchen tongs, but what they represent are birds with large beaks that are able to scoop and hold, okay? So large tongues. Scientists, I also have a spoon, okay? I have a pair of tweezers. You can pinch them together. And then finally, I have a toothpick. Yes, the toothpick does represent a beak of a bird. Now, I have a bowl, and this bowl is going to represent the stomach. So we're actually going to do this activity 4 different times, each time with a different tool, either the tongs, the tweezers, the spoon, or the toothpick. And now on this plate, scientists, I have a bunch of different foods, not cooked. In this plate, I have popcorn, I have dried beans, I have rice, and I also have some candy, some Mike and Ike's. Now, what's going to happen, scientists, is I'm going to use the different tools that represent the bird beaks, different sizes, different shapes, and I'm going to simply try to get as much food as possible in one bite. So, let's start with the tongs. All right, scientists, so I'm reaching in, grabbing. Now I have quite a bit of stuff in here, and I want to focus on what kinds of things I have in here. I have popcorn, I have rice, I have beans, and I have the Mike and Ike's, the candies. So with my tongs, or with this bird beak, I was able to pick up all the different types of food that was available to me. Now you'll notice I also was able to pick up, get all the rice out, quite a bit of food as well. So let's dump it back into our plate. I'll get the remaining rice and popcorn that fell out on accident, put that back on the plate. And let's try again. This time, remember we're just taking one bite. I'm gonna use the spoon. So I've got my spoon. And I'm gonna dump it in the bowl. Remember, our bowl represents the stomach. Scientists, in my bowl, I have popcorn, rice, beans, and Mike and Ike's. So with my spoon, I was still able to get all the food possible. But scientists, do you notice a difference between the amount of food that I picked up this time with the spoon compared to last time with the tongs? Yeah, there's way less food here. So in my one bite, the tongs were able to get more food than the spoon. Now let's move on to the tweezers. I know you're probably laughing by now because you already know what's going to happen. Here we go. Take my tweezers, and I got a bean. Put it into the stomach or the bowl. Dump out my bean. Got a piece of rice from last time. This is just one little tiny bean. So with my tweezers, I really wasn't able to pick up very much food. Now I wonder if I tried really hard, there we go. If I only pick up rice, I'm able to pick up 3 grains of rice. So that allows us to see that different bird beaks allow us to pick up, or allow birds to eat different amounts of food. Now we have one bird beak left, the toothpick. Let's see. I'm not getting anything. Spilling. Do you think a bird that has a beak like a toothpick is going to survive very well? The only thing I can pick up with my toothpick is the Mike and Ike, because I'm able to stick my beak, like a hummingbird, into the sugary substance to get out the nectar. Now scientists, this is difficult. Did you see how careful I had to be to stick the toothpick into the Mike and Ike? Birds that have beaks like this, you typically don't see very many of them because it's more difficult for them to survive, because it's more difficult for them to find food. So let's go back. Let's make a prediction. Which bird beak out of my tools, the toothpick, tweezers, spoon, or tongs, allowed our bird to get the most food? Yeah, it was the tongs, right? What was the second most? The spoon. Then the tweezer was the easiest to find food. Not very much food, but find food. And then finally the toothpick was the most difficult. Scientists, this demo just shows us, it models for us how different organisms or different animals are able to survive in the wild. It's not easy to find food. There's not food always just laying around in nature for our animals, for our birds, for our squirrels, for our groundhogs, you name it. But having specialized structures or adaptations allows animals to be able to survive better. Now, there's no way a large beak that represents the tongs are going to fit on a hummingbird. But hummingbirds are really, really little. so they don't require as much food as a seagull. So having a beak that they just stick into some sort of organism plant that allows them to get nectar from makes more sense. Now, scientists, there are some animals that have gone extinct. There was this animal called the dodo bird. It was a bird that had no wings. Think about that. And it wasn't able to survive very well in its environment. So scientists, next week, we're actually going to read a book together called The Beaks of Birds. And it's going to go through, it's got some really cool pictures in here, but like here's some hummingbirds, right? And it's going to go through and tell us how the beaks of birds, there's a larger one, are adaptations that allow different birds to survive. So scientists, we will continue this idea of adaptations, especially with birds, next week. I'll see you back next week. Have a good day.
I chose manual because it's challenging and fun, and it can help me with college.
I chose manual because I wanted to get a jump start in my career with culinary arts.
I chose manual to acquire skills I'd use in real life.
I chose manual because I want to be an ER doctor, and being an EMT is my first step.
Kickstart your future today at Manual Career and Technical Center. Manual is open for all 11th and 12th grade students in both Kansas and Missouri. Learn more today at enrollkc.org/manual or call 816-418-5200.
Hello, I'm Erica Mavian, and welcome to KCPS Homeroom. Today we're going to do some coding. We're going to start out with a story. It's pumpkin coding time, animated storytelling. Today's objective is we're going to develop a plan that describes our program, sequence of events, our goals, and our expected outcomes. So the directions for your coding program today. This is going to be for our coders that are in kindergarten through second grade. First, you're going to read the story, and then you're going to think about the process and the different steps that happened in the story. You're going to provide a retell of the sequence of events that occurred in that story. Then you're going to be able to demonstrate all of your plans by creating your own detailed drawing. Now think of all the different details that are in the story, and you'll be able to put those in your drawing so that you can create your own story. So make sure you have all of the events that happened in order of the story. And then finally, we're going to use our Scratch Junior app to make a coding story. It's going to be so fun. Let's get started. First, we're going to read a story called It's Pumpkin Time. Get ready for our story. It's called It's Pumpkin Time by Zoe Hall and Sherry Halpern. Look at the seeds. I wonder what part of the story that's going to be. It's Pumpkin Time by Zoe Hall and illustrated by Sherry Halpern. All summer long, my brother and I get ready for our favorite holiday. Can you guess what season it is? Well, I guess you probably know because we plant a jack-o'-lantern patch. First, I turn the soil with the shovel, and my brother uses a spade to dig a narrow row, 1 inch deep, and then we drop in the pumpkin seeds and cover them with soil. We water them and we wait in the sun to warm them up. Before long, the seeds grow into tiny roots and small green shoots poke up through the ground. The shoots grow into vines and the vines grow longer and longer. They get so long I can see them. I wonder what's next. Well, they're going to find out that every week when they water them, they're going to need to pull up some weeds because the weeds and the plants don't go together. But they soon see buds where the flowers will bloom, and the yellow flowers show us where the pumpkins will grow. And at first, we have a small, tiny green pumpkin, and it's going to keep growing. And then they grow bigger, and all the patch is filled with vines and small pumpkins. And then they grow bigger, and the leaves grow bigger, and the pumpkins. And soon it's fall, and the great pumpkins change color from green to yellow. And what color is going to be next? You're right, orange! Now they're ready to be picked, and we've never grown such big pumpkins. I bet they're going to be ready to pick it. Yep, Mom and Dad, they help us cut the pumpkins from the vines, and we gather them in a wheelbarrow. We can take them home. It's just time for us to put on the faces, and we may could put in candles, but we have to let our parents help. Do you know what they're going to do next? I wonder. Do you have an idea? I bet they'll set it out in their house for decoration. Yes, they do. They put on their costumes and they get all set for the celebration of fall. They even dress up the dog. Everyone looks so festive. So now they're able to go out and be with all of their friends, with all of their pumpkins and all of their costumes. So let's see how our pumpkin seeds grow underground. First, we have the seed. It's nice and tiny. It's 1 inch deep in the ground. And after a few days, a shoot will come out. Its shoot will grow downward into the ground. And finally, the shoot will grow stem hairs. And those will be little roots that will start to sprout out from the little seed. Next, the shell will come off of the seed and it will continue to grow downwards, deep into the ground. Next, the shoot will start to go through the soil so it pokes out and forms small, tiny leaves. And next, our pumpkin leaf is starting to evolve. Our pumpkin will be coming through soon, and I bet we'll see a flower. What color is that flower again? Do you remember? Each seed is 1 inch thick. You have to plant it 1 inch deep into the ground. And then the shoot will come out. And it's going to grow downward. And it'll take a few days for your tiny stem hairs to come out as the soil gives it nutrients and it continues to grow. And it'll get bigger. And then the shell will come off the seed. And it will continue to grow down deep into the ground. And it'll be nice and curly with those roots that are growing. We usually don't see those until we see the stem shoot through the dirt and the small seed leaves come through. And finally, we'll start to see the pumpkin leaves. They will start to emerge. The pumpkin leaves are clover shaped, and then our pumpkin flower will be able to be produced. It will be yellow, and then we'll know that our pumpkin is growing. That has been It's Pumpkin Time. We're so excited about all of the growing that will take place. Let's think about how we can turn this into a coding game. That's going to be next. We're ready to start our Scratch Junior coding. Are you excited about our pumpkin coding? Do you remember all the parts of the story? Because we are going to use that story to create our coding. So here we go. The first thing I remember from the story is there was a boy and a girl, and they were in their garden. So when I thought about how I wanted to create the story, I knew that I needed a backdrop that was going to replicate them being in their farm. So I chose the farm background. Where did I get the background? I chose the background here from our options. I looked through to find one that was going to work well for our background. When I was ready, I selected it by tapping it, and it turns orange with an orange outline across the top. And then I have to choose the check mark so that is my background. So when we're ready, you choose the background and it appears. And this is the first page of our program. So now, what else was in the story? Well, it had a title. We need to give our coding project a title. If we click the ABCs, it will give us a box, and then we can type in what words we want. Maybe you want to give it a title. Maybe you want to say who the story is by. It's you. You're the author. Maybe you want to tell each stage of your story. For this story, we gave it a title, Pumpkin Coding. And then I wanted to say which step of the story it was. I gave this step number 1 for the seeds. So the second thing I needed to do was add the characters. For this page, I said that it was going to be our girl. I went over to our character section and clicked the plus, and I was able to locate the girl by scrolling up and down till I found the character that I wanted. I chose the girl by putting my finger over the top, and then I clicked the check mark. And then our girl appears in our backdrop. The next thing, seeds. I don't think I could find a color or a shape that I wanted, so I decided to make my own seeds. So I clicked that plus again, and I chose my paintbrush so that I could make the seeds I wanted. I knew that the seeds were oval shaped, so I chose the squiggly line that was the circle. When I chose my circle, I'm able to use my finger to draw the shape that I want. Finally, I can choose the color that I want to make for the seed. And it will fill in if I choose the paint bucket. And there we have our seed. We're going to add that seed to our backdrop. And there she is. So if you want 2 seeds, you'll draw 2 seeds. If you want many more, you could put those in your backdrop while you're drawing them. And that's going to complete our page 1. Now I'm ready for our second page. I go over to the second section over here, and I'm able to pick another background. But we're still in the farm, so I just kept the same one. This time, I gave it a title, number 2, our plant. Do you remember that our seeds turned into a plant? I do. That was the second part of our story. Our seed turned into a plant. Part 2. I gave it a title by choosing the ABCs, and I also went to draw my plant. So I added the character. For the boy, he's here. The girl, she's there, and I chose the plant by drawing it. I went to my paintbrush to make my illustration of the plant that I chose. And next, I'm ready for step 3. So first we have the seeds. Second, we have the plant. Do you remember what the plant turns into? Well, I remember that it had a vine and a flower. So there we have our plant, we have the vine, and we have our flowers. Do you remember what color the flowers were? You're right, it's yellow. I was able to go to our section of characters, scroll to find one that I liked, and then I could have that in there. And if you find something you don't want, you can just delete it by clicking the X, and that just works like an eraser. All right, so let's see. We have step 1, we have the seeds. Step 2, we have the plant. Step 3, we have the vine. And step 4, we have the pumpkin. For the pumpkin section, we added some friends by choosing our plus button. Now, all of our characters get to do something. When we choose the green flag, you'll get to see. Here's our program. Yay, it's pumpkin harvest time. Happy coding, and thank you for joining me for KCPS Homeroom.
Southeast because of the culture, the band program, and restorative justice.
I love Southeast because of the academics, sports, and students.
I love Southeast because of the people, the energy, and the advanced classes.
It's not alike. I love Southeast because the students here at Southeast are full of potential and they believe in achieving anything. We are Southeast. Southeast. We stand shoulder to shoulder.
Join the Southeast family. Enroll today.
The desire to create lives within each of us. From Grammy-winning producers and musicians, to NBA stars, to Navy admirals and Medal of Honor recipients, to internationally renowned artists, and beloved local muralists, Paseo graduates have been creating their own success, their own history, their own legacy since 1926. Now it's your time. Create your future at Paseo Academy of Fine and Performing Arts. Learn more at enrollkc.org/Paseo.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's Dr. Jones again. And as I said, we're going to pick up our conversation where we left off last week. As you recall, we were talking about photosynthesis and how photosynthesis is how we make sugar molecules from light energy. So this class, or this episode, we're really going to be talking about, so now that we have sugar, what are we going to do with it? And further go into why photosynthesis is so important. Now, as always, we've got to start with our standards. And as we said, the standard for our middle school actually links up with the standards for our high school. All right? So again, with our middle school standard, we're looking at how photosynthesis and cellular respiration work together to cycle energy through not only ecosystems, but through organisms. With high school, we focus first on the reactions that are involved in photosynthesis. But then we move next to, okay, now that we have that molecule, that sugar molecule from photosynthesis, how do we use that to keep organisms alive through the process of cellular respiration? And how do we rearrange those molecules to get energy out to allow a cell or an organism to do all those characteristics that we talked about that are unique to living things? So, let's talk about cellular respiration. Now, I'm going to tell you, cellular respiration in itself is kind of a misnomer. Here's why. Most people, when they think of respiration, they think of breathing, right? Well, in terms of science, and especially in terms of cells, cells don't really breathe, they don't have any lungs. So when we talk about respiration in terms of cells, what we're actually talking about is taking oxygen and producing carbon dioxide through oxidation. I know, huh? Think of it this way. Oxygen goes in, carbon dioxide comes out. But in the process, you make energy. That's what respiration is about. So when we go through cellular respiration, notice two things have to occur. Oxygen has to go in, and carbon dioxide has to come out. Now, this is the equation for cellular respiration. One of the things that I want you to notice is that for you to go through cellular respiration, you need more than just oxygen. You also need what? Glucose. You gotta have an energy source, right? And notice, the number of glucose molecules, which again, 6 carbons, equals the number of what? Carbon dioxide molecules. 1 carbon dioxide, but you have 6 of them. Again, conservation of matter, conservation of mass, okay? And so what you find is that in this process, you're going to be converting glucose and oxygen into carbon dioxide and water. And in the process of doing this, breaking these bonds, you're going to release energy. Okay? So, just like with just like with photosynthesis, cellular respiration has the equation and it has the process. Here's what I mean. Remember, with photosynthesis, it was carbon dioxide plus water equals, or giving you with light, oxygen and a glucose molecule. Well, with cellular respiration, you have a glucose molecule plus oxygen giving you carbon dioxide plus water. The difference is, with photosynthesis, light energy went in. With cellular respiration, chemical energy comes out. That's what an ATP is. It's actually a chemical molecule. To be very, very specific, it's one of our nucleic acids, like DNA and RNA. I know. What? Yes. Now, again, just like I told you, step one, you probably have seen this in elementary school. You definitely saw it in middle school. Once you get to high school, we leave this equation alone. Why? Because this is like just the primer, where we're not even painting yet. We have to get to this side of the house. This side of the house is where all of the action occurs. So this, which is the process of cellular respiration, gives us this, which is just the basic reaction. Okay? Now, let's talk about why things are like this. Give you an example. So I started reading The Count of Monte Cristo. You may say, how did you get to The Count of Monte Cristo? Alright, so let me take a step back. So, Lovecraft Country, if you got HBO, you know what I'm talking about. They mention a book. So I'm like, oh, book. It was done by Dumont, which is a black man. Alright, black author, got it. Great. I remember the movie. I'm going to get the book. That's the book. Here's why I'm like, that's the book. If you get the unabridged version of The Count of Monte Cristo, it's 640 pages. That's the abridged. If you get the unabridged, it's 982 pages. The movie is only 2 hours and 15 minutes. And the bad part about it is, there's so much in the book that they couldn't possibly put it in the movie. Same kind of deal. When you learn this equation, it was like the movie. This is what you're responsible for. That's the book. Alright? So, if you're looking at your cellular respiration process, it's actually 3 processes. Okay? Here's what I mean. First, you have this thing called glycolysis. I'm going to talk about what that is. Then, you have this one called the Krebs cycle. Not Krebs cycle, Krebs cycle. Yeah. And then lastly, you have the electron transport chain. Alright, so we are going to break down each of these. And we're going to start with glycolysis. Now, again, just like I broke down last week photosynthesis, we're going to break down glycolysis. So first of all, if we look at glyco means sugar. Okay? Okay, cool. No problem. Lysis means to either break down or break apart. So when you look at glycolysis, what you're actually doing is taking a sugar molecule and you're breaking it apart. And to be more specific, you're taking a sugar molecule with 6 carbons and you're breaking it apart to give you 2 sugar molecules with 3 carbons. Think about it like this. Man comes in the store, say, hey, I got a 10. I need 2 5s. Dude behind the counter says, alright, I'll give these 2 5s. Now, let's be real. That's if the guy is generous. Normally, if you go from making a 10 into 2 5s, the dude behind the counter, like, you gotta buy something. I mean, you know, candy bar or something. So he really gonna just give you like 1 5 and 4 1s, because you know, making change ain't free. Neither is this, but we'll get into that in a second. But my point is, what you're doing is taking the molecule and making change. All right. Again, same number of carbons on both sides, same number of hydrogens. You know, pretty much, more or less. All right. Because remember, we got some things that pop out. Now, let's talk about why glycolysis is important. Fun fact. All right. So, this is a ohmi, or a ohm. I think that's how you pronounce it. Ohm. I think so. Anyway, here's the thing you need to know about this guy. So this little blind, flesh-colored newt, aka like a aquatic gecko, it can go 10 years without eating. It doesn't eat very much food. However, if we look at an elephant, Brumhilda over here, she eats anywhere from 100 to 400 pounds of food per day. Here's what I'm saying. If you look at glycolysis, remember, you're not getting much out of this. 2 ATPs. Certain organisms, that's all they need. Other organisms need a lot more. So, when we look at, well, who needs what? Here's what I want you to understand. We have 2 main types of organisms, all right? Get real broad here, so follow me. We have our prokaryotes, and we have our eukaryotes. Prokaryotes, bacteria, archaebacteria, that's old bacteria. Not like, no, not old bacteria as in old in age, old bacteria as in ancient, prehistoric. So think of these as bacteria that you would find like in hot springs or places that are very, very cold. Namely, outside of another organism. Because think, human beings, we have bacteria inside of us, but those bacteria are used to our temperature. Dogs, cats, rats, bats, all of them have bacteria that are associated with them. Those are these eubacteria. You thinking about new. Well, one reason why they're new is because they are in constant contact with the rest of these guys. These, they were around when it was just them. Alright? You know, it's like those old people that purchased a home when it was just them, no one else. And now all the young folks moved in with the kids and the dogs and the old people sitting on the front of the yard talking about, be quiet. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. Alright, so, anyway. Prokaryotes. Eukaryotes, everybody else. So we have protista. So think about protists, or like the amoebas and things like that. Fungi is a fun guy. Alright. Plantia, plants. Animalia, animals. So if you are a protist, a fungus, a plant, or an animal, you are a eukaryote. If you're a bacteria, you're a prokaryote. And if you're a virus, you're not alive. Viruses are not alive. Don't forget that. Alright. Now, big take-home message. What is the difference between a prokaryote and a eukaryote? Well, I'm going to break it down real easy. These guys have organelles. These guys don't. It's like Mounds and Almond Joy. Sometimes you feel like a nut. Sometimes you don't. If you look at eukaryotes, you find that you have what? Mitochondria, chloroplasts. You have the nucleus. You have Golgi complex, endoplasmic reticulum. You look at a bacteria, it's meager accommodations. Meager accommodations. You have a cell wall, great, wonderful. They just threw your DNA in this thing called a nucleoid. So it would be like somebody just throwing you a mattress and saying, okay, there you go, there's your bedroom. It's a mattress. Nah, it's a bedroom. And then, you know, you threw some ribosomes around. That's like somebody just throwing your meals around, not giving you a place to put them. Just like, you know, here's a wine fridge. Here's like, you know, something to put your cans in. But that's about it. Okay? So, understand that the difference between these two, this is compartmentalized, this isn't. Another way of looking at this would be, if we said this, which is your mitochondria, organelle. This, cytoplasm, no organelle. So when we look at how this relates to this, prokaryotes do what? This. Eukaryotes can do what? All of this. That's the big take-home message. All right? Now, in looking at the whole, well, why is one better than the other? Now we got to get to the dollars and cents. Right? We got to see, okay, what are we doing here? Here's what I mean. Grandpa, I told you before, said you need money to make money. True. So if you look at glycolysis, 2 ATPs, real cheap. That's, I give you a 5, I give you a 10, you give me 2 5s. But now, if I give you 100, I gotta take some. I'm not about to just give you like 5 20s. Come on, man, you can throw me out with like $10 or something. So if you're looking at this, here's what we're saying. For those prokaryotes, those simple organisms, 2 ATPs, perfect. They're happy. They're fine. But for eukaryotes, nah, we got bills to pay. We need some energy. And that's where we get these other 36. Now, I know. Some of you guys are thinking, wait a minute, I thought 2, 36, that's 38. I told you it takes money to make money. So this whole process is going to cost you 2 ATPs. But you got them. Just like the dude with the 100. You got $100. I'm just asking you for like 10 just to make change. Man, got to keep the lights on and everything. You know what I'm saying? So, here's my take-home message for you this week. Understand that when we go through this process of cellular respiration, what we're actually doing is taking all of those carbohydrates that we get from plants and we're using them to make energy so that we can continue to survive. I hope that this explains why sugars are so important, and I hope that you have a great day. I'll see you next week.
At Lincoln Middle School, students discover their talents and passions, where teachers plant the seeds of lifelong learning.
I am Lincoln Middle.
Where excellence is nurtured. Students develop the skills to be successful in school, career, and beyond.
Je suis Lincoln Middle.
Lincoln Middle is the public school where your child will thrive and grow. Open a world of possibilities. Apply today. Learn more at enrollkc.org/Lincoln Middle.